It's another brief moment in time. We get to see the change on the timelines. We're shifting, twisted bits of technology, shifting, lifting up the little bits of reality. While the quick trips through the space-time, we're surely a randomly sparking the photons around me. Let the light flow from the heat show when the photons ignite, highlighting yo. Then you'll know it's that time when we force a change in our mind's eye. Ho ho! A little bit Linux with something in us. It's almost like we something else, autonomous, or maybe perhaps it's that missing piece you need. Perhaps it's that simple message you're searching. Perhaps it's just a different time framing. Us people match the fake show in the mainframe. Getting excited, so are the photons. Don't laminate so we can change the coupon. Let me raise the hash rate, submit the coupon fake, and replace the rate with our major bags. Crypto technology, like cryptographic money and hashing your life into a set of QRs. It doesn't matter, 'cause this was 3D change perspective. Play! I go to the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
What up, what up, everybody? It is me, 3D, here to hopefully change your mind and change your perspective on ads, specifically spending money on ads is actually proof of propaganda. So, have you ever heard the phrase, ads are corporate propaganda? Most have heard something similar to this, but not this exact phrase. And today I'm hoping to change your perspective not only on what ads really are, but also what the ad Spendages is. Like, sure, we could say ad Spendages is the amount spent on ads, the most amount of spent, or the least amount. But what was going to be why traditional ads? Like why was traditional ad systems or word of mouth superior to now or targeted ad systems? But that ended up not being able to be like you can distinctly define why target ads don't work and why traditional ads don't work. You can also target exactly why target. You can also say the exact reasons why target ads do work, why traditional ads do work. You cannot definitively say why one works more than the other. We have a lot of data to show you that one does work more than the other. But I also have a lot of information to show you the backside of why one works more than the other. Because one is more of true propaganda of business, corporate propaganda, while the other one is more of true propaganda to the name, communist propaganda. And before we get into all of that, I do want to thank The Organized for teaming up with Bitcoin Live, Digital Broadcasting DB, because, well, Bitcoin Live and DB and The Organized are a perilous combo. And I see new heights for both organizations. Now, if you haven't checked out any of The Organized early morning broadcasts for their stacks or other topics, because they seem to be taking off with every day, find them on X, Twitter, and the other social media platforms, like where you've seen this right now, whatever platform you're viewing this at. Now, before I go any further, I do want to thank today's sponsor, Shield Folio. Now, I am doing most of today without a preview, so if at any point in time starts sounding confusing or I seem to fumble over myself, I do apologize. So I want to thank Shield Folio for sponsoring today's episode from within the Quantum Bennett, as well as the Bitcoin Live TV network. Now, if you haven't seen Shield Folio, well, they're like a little black book that are made from stone paper. So they're fade resistant, tear resistant, and even water resistant. So you know the info and secrets you store in your Shield Folio will last and survive whatever you throw at it. I personally own a Shield Folio, and I use it for website info, contacts, crypto keys, among other things. So these little black books are pocket size and ready to be by your side regardless of the adventure you have in real life or online. Now, the best thing I basically use this for is anything I don't want to store on my computer, I want to store off my computer, I really use this for. Now they have other things on their website and stuff that allow you to take this technology a bit further, but if you see this big QR right here in the middle of the screen, also in the bottom of the screen throughout the entire episode, you'll see this little QR. I don't know exactly where it's at. It's one of these around me, and well, basically you can scan that at any point in time, go to the website and make some purchases, and then use the code Bitcoin Live 20, get 20% off your purchase today. All right, thank you again, Shieldfolio, for sponsoring us. Now, before we go any further, I gotta get in with the roll-ins because we're about to roll in. Sorry about that. For some reason it wouldn't play, then when it did play, it played in the middle. Alrighty then. Welcome everybody. Hello again. Scan that code throughout today's episode and use that code to get 20% off today. We're gonna drop and get the right one. We're gonna drop this one. Alright. Get rid of the preview. Let's try this again. So as you can see, we have chat up and ready to go. So if you're on any of the platforms viewing this and you chat, it should pop up on the screen. We should be able to review it with you and have some fun. So throughout today's episode, we're going to do some stuff. So before we go anywhere, well, welcome to the Photon of the Greater Fourth Dimension from within the quadrant, Fourth Dimension Quantum Machine. Oh, I gotta bring that down. It's a lot of words. So anyways, throughout today's episode, you'll see whenever on the screen or anything that you guys can follow along with, will pop up this little pop-up. So this little QR will allow you to basically just follow along. Also, there should be links in the description at any point in time, so if you're watching this now on live or replaying it at any other point in time, you can still get the information that we're dropping. Also follow along with the video as you go through, so you can kind of read and listen as you go. So I just want to point out that this right here in front of you is the deorganized media that I was talking about earlier. They go live almost every morning, and they earn Bitcoin, stacking stacks, all sorts of different things. But basically, they're your daily hookup for anything that's digitally popping. And that's who I was talking about earlier. I just wanted to use them as an example to kind of explain to you how we're going to do this. Because, well, that's exactly how we're going to do this. Now, today's a little bit special, a little bit different. I feel like some context is kind of needed for moving forward with today's episode. So, I don't do this very often. So, this is how you know it's a very important episode. So, spending money on ads has been the thing to keep businesses afloat. And the bigger the business became, the more these ads were kind of needed. So, there are even to this day many businesses that stay afloat without advertising. 100%. But they only use the word of mouth advertising. So we could spend an episode exploring on how spending money on non-ad stuff could be advertising, but instead we're only going to be looking at why spend more for less with ads. So we're going to be only talking about actual wealth and money spent on ad services and ads. So when looking into like traditional advertising versus targeted advertising versus new age advertising, I can't believe that there's actually a new age advertising now. But the biggest trend changes were around times of political voting. Now, this is one of the big things I want to be able to prove to you. But at the same time, it's depending on what type of political office holder we're actually in office. And also the specific regions within political roles of power within, like the USA, for example, they showed this strange occurrence where certain types of political votes ended up showing the amount of money. Like we can correlate the amount of money spent on ads to specific political voting. We are going to start at looking at direct references of these political party influence on ad spendages. This is a little bit convoluted. The whole topic is somewhat convoluted, confusing, and depending on which shine of light you choose to look from, there are tons of examples of how ads actually are propaganda. But it's probably easier to show the tactics used in advertising than it is to actually show everything else. So that's why we're going with this method. Now, if I'm lucky, I can show you that ads are propaganda because ads replace art, and at one time art was used to get people in the door of a business and unprovable perspectives, but a realistic perspective. So again, I'm saying at one point in time, art was actually used to get people in the door. It's an unprovable perspective, but if you go back and you look, it's a very realistic perspective. Especially original ads, mostly were just art. Okay, let's get into it without any more audio distractions. Hopefully. Alright. So, we are now back. We're going back to what we're going to. So, throughout today's episode, there's going to be a couple of images that we will be showcasing and will be shown on the screen. And this is where you can find those images. Also, there's a couple of PDFs I will be showing. This is where you can find those as well. This is the GitHub that I have for the show. So if you need to find anything that I don't show a QR for, it's most likely in here. Okay, so this is a list of data about the Communist Party specifically. So something many forget is propaganda was a Marxist tactic that most likely started before then, but really got known from Marxism. It's known as they invented it. They invented these new ways to use them in types of advertising, like to use of psychology and advertising and stuff. So what we got here are a bunch of data points. So this page isn't as important as for someone else later on, but we are going to be using data points from here to definitely help us in our talk. So we need to go into this one. So this is the Wikipedia for communist propaganda. Coming in here, it kind of explains a lot of stuff pretty quickly. So communist propaganda is the artistic and social promotion of ideology of communism, communist worldwide, communist society, and the interests of the communist movement. So it doesn't even have to be communism directly. So socialism, certain types of ideologies, they are considered communist movement thoughts or communist type views. And so propaganda of communist propaganda comes from all of that, not just one specific or only definitively. So while it tends to carry a negative connotation in the Western world, the term propaganda broadly refers to any publication or campaign aimed at promoting a cause and was or is used for official purposes by most communist-oriented governments. We could rephrase that to is or was used official purposes by governments. The term may also refer to political parties' opponents' campaigns. So that's where it was really commonly used in Marxism, was to force a bunch of people into communism, like trick people into the ideals of communism, and to then also basically make people not like the opponents of the Communist Party. This can go down to as like your friends and neighbors and things like that, and there's a whole lot more here. For the information, that's what you so be it. I need you to understand that communist propaganda is the main form of propaganda that we know of as an ad form, and it's like kind of where it became the biggest to use psychological and sociological tactics within the ads. So we're going to keep moving. All right. So this page right here is an has a bunch of interactive objects inside of it, and so we're gonna specifically click down into one of these. So this will be from like our direct reference example data about electoral office votes for communist members, because when looking at the sentiment in a country, whom they vote to run their country, state, or local offices will show much about them, about the voters. So even if someone says they are about one political alignment, the way they vote tells more information about that individual. So, or in this case, a sentiment of a country. So if a country is a more communist country, you would think that there would be a natural reduction of ad spendages. But if you remember that communists naturally used propaganda in ads, well, because it's mostly a form of ad, then you'll realize that ad spendages actually goes up whenever communism is at the reign of a country. So I can't prove this 100% fact, because of some ads will always exist in some form. Communists did target advertising. They targeted specific groups, people's, situations, events. They did targeting advertising, and that is directly rooted in communism, which is why it made a resurgence during the digital realm. So let's look at some of this related info on the site. So we're going to go to this one right here, which is votes for the communist candidates by county over the years, and then it's an interactive map. So we sit here, we can go through the different electoral years between the times designated 1924 to 1946, and we can look at all the different votes across the thing. So I went through here and did that for a bunch of stuff. I'm hoping to get it to load so we can just show you guys some of the stuff. It does take a bit to actually load the map, so I'm running a bunch of stuff in the background, so. But there's a couple things we should do, like set this to all and set this to all, which just gives you a generic overview of the kind of stuff people were voting for over these 24 years, 22 years. So this is what the map is showing. This is everything that's going on. And as you can see, there was quite a bit of communism in those 20 years. And it does fluctuate quite a bit where they're at, all these different things. Now, one thing I did like about this, it shows you a bunch of different things you can do, like the strongholds, where were they most voted for, and things like that. So there's definitely more here for you to view if you want to come back. Again, I'll give you this link so you can find this this map. There's more here too. So now we're going to go to a PDF file, or PD file. PDF has file in the name. No, so we're going to go to this portable document. So when looking at this, we see the recorded votes from when one of those communist tracker maps. Sidebar. Hate that crap. So basically, this just shows you the year, how many communist votes, and the spendages made. This gets it all in easier to read information. And as you can see, there is specifically in this data set media versus non-media ad spend, and it's really important here because the only non-media ad spend is propaganda. It's direct propaganda. And at one time, America used to track propaganda ad versus media ad. And a media ad is considered anything used for corporations to spread corporate information across news, magazines, radio, TV. So newsprint, or physical print, or media print, or TV print, radio print. And then we take those, when you get two different outputs on the bottom. So the one below, the one that's almost at the very bottom, is votes over ad spend total. That's literally a number of, that's just those two divided. So I got this, hold on a second, I got notes, let me look at my notes. So what we're looking at the bottom of the first, at the bottom or the first of the top bottom number is the difference of total ad spendages to communist votes that year. The very bottom number is the percentage of the difference in spendage compared to the votes. So the top number is like a line defining number. It's a baseline defining information. And so the closer that number is to 0, the less potential influence there was from the Communist Party that year. So the very bottom difference percentage shows the basic percentage of actual influence that is based on the difference of votes to the ad budget. So the larger percentage, the bigger the percentage is on the very bottom, the more influence those votes that were in there actually had on their targeted party members. So it's like, okay, so for example, 1922, it's got 1.2 total votes, right? So its amount of influence was not very large, but its percentage of influence was half, at least, just about half of all the ad spend was actually on propaganda that year. 1924, we see there's a 33 vote baseline, but only 1.58% was influence. So at this point, we do have to point out one really big thing here. I have a thing that says special note. I have to note that the very first different percentage should be correct, that 41.48%. But similar to how we have missing data in 1944, which if I scroll over there, you see there's missing data. We do not have missing data here, okay? It's most likely because it's the very first object. There could be some influence that nearly 42%, but I'm considering the idea that the percentage of influence for 1922 is most definitely noticeable larger amount than the years following combined in this graph. We just don't know exactly how much. We just know it's definitely more. So as we keep going through this, as we go to the right, you see as we get closer and closer to like 1930, there is major jumps in the amount of influence, but yet the baseline doesn't really change a whole lot. It jumps around. In then 1932, you have a major difference with the least amount of percentage, and then that percentage of least amount is slowly climbing up while that baseline is slowly going back down. And so we see this major influence where there is sometimes a large, vast amount of influence and not a whole lot of people listening. And then sometimes there's not a whole lot of influence, but a ton of people listening. But these years between 1930 and 1942, they kind of have this least amount of people listening and least amount of influence. I wonder what happened between those years. Like, what, a major war or something? Something like that. But then after that, after 1944, and there is an issue with 1944 that we cannot get proper counts on the vote. That's because there was a lot of places that would not allow them to vote that year. And so we look at 1946, the very next year they allowed, the very next election or whatever, and we see a major jump. So we can assume that in 1944 there was a major jump there as well. And I do know for a fact that there actually was a major jump in 1944, which is the real reason why the data is not there, because they were trying to say extremely high, within 200,000-300,000 votes or so, and there's no way. Sometimes you have to look at data and take it in as it is, most likely faulty, or where the data source was coming from, which we are not including that data source, so that is where it faulted out of. So we're going to keep moving though. So one of these sites we use for previous chart data or whatever, I want to show this right here. This is where a lot of this stuff comes from, because it's a little bit more confusing. That's why I set up these little PDFs for you to make it easier for you to break it down. You see how like here they have GDP. Well, CPI is normally the way to actually show if ads are making a difference. And so here's a lot of information, a lot of helpful information right here. And as you see, as we go further and further down, it gets scarier and scarier and scarier. 2007, that's how many votes for the Communist Party got. No ad spendages. This is how much ad money was spent on ads. My bad. Actually, I'm looking at the wrong. It's money spent on ads. And part of the GDP. How much of the GDP was spent on ads? 2%. And traditionally, 2% kind of high. So, oh no, kind of low. Now it's kind of high. But that's a global, or it's a full U.S. expenditure, not a global and not business only. So it's confusing. Make sure you get that QR. We're about to go back into a PDF, portable document file, and it's basically the same thing, but more information on the page. So now we have another black line. Now below this black line are two new bottom numbers: the consumer price index, or CPI, and below that is the inflation difference based on the previous year. So a great way to view this is the more excess wealth spent by Americans will result in higher CPIs, but if the inflation is also high, then that will account for some of the high CPI. So you got to take these two things in consideration together. So for example, in 1922 we had 16.8 millions in millions spent, but the inflation from the previous year was actually quite low. So that's real money spent. Versus 1924, they had higher CPI, but they actually had a little bit of inflation, so it was actually less money spent. And that trend continues, where there's technically less money spent, even though the CPI went up. And then CPI goes down, that also inflation went down, which means people were recovering. And then we see CPI going down, but inflation went down further, which means more money is technically being spent, but it looks less because it has less. It's got more purchasing power. So you're physically spending less, and usually you're saving. And that keeps happening in 1932, where they're saving some more. Now they're no longer saving money in 1934. Now they're passively spending a lot of money. Not really, like they're spending to have their things. They've actually spent less money. They had less purchasing power. And in 1936, we see that it goes to 1390 CPI at 1%. So it's had more, so they actually have less spending power, and then down to 2%. So they're still not quite back to 1932 power. And then we see it going up and up and up, getting worse and worse and worse. And so in 1946, that really important year where we had that big major bump, that 8% of influence is a large amount of influence. It's actually almost the same as the influence of inflation that same year, which means the amount of actual CPI money spent is extremely low. So anytime we see the spendage of ad technically high, but inflation is high and the CPI doesn't matter, well, if we include the concept of what's the difference between that, for example, 17 at 1.6, this 19 at 8.5, well, we're looking closer to like 11 or 12 CPI in reality. 11, 12 million isn't a whole lot compared to what could have been 19 million. Well, when we see that major there, we say, okay, we know those are points of propaganda influence being pushed. People are not spending money, a lot of money put in ads, so much that it's equivalent to our GDP. What? But no, in this case, the amount of votes for Communist Party that year was equivalent almost to the amount of inflation that year. So what that really means is, again, the more we see people voting for communism, the more inflation we see, the less, or the more ads we see, the less we see people spend as well. It's a crazy influence of these three things working together. Alright, so like this is where the CPI data came from. You may want to pull this up on your end a couple hours later after show or something like this, just for you later. A lot of information. There's a lot more here than we actually went over. But definitely there for you to come back and view. Okay. So in this right here, I think the image of the ad is kind of more telling than anything else. That ads are a form of propaganda. But we are going to read some of this article too, because I mean the info is actually legit and it's not very long. So let's read the picture. Thrifty wives help. In these days of depression, our incomes are less, and it is absolutely necessary that each member of the household work together in getting as much for their money as possible. Housewives who formerly used the telephone to order the groceries and drugs now go to the cut price grocery and drugstore to buy their necessities at enormous savings. More and more each day, these same thrifty wives are learning the savings to be had by buying their furniture the same way. Cut price quality furniture, it's smart to shop. All an ad. So we see old-fashioned furniture where the big sofas, big loaves and stuff. They're selling this 3-room complete set at $185 for only $20 down. And then so you're gonna be doing payment plans. And then you got this like kitchenette set, and they got all these different possible things. You see price separately, only for $49 each. Porcelain finish and cream, so all these different little things, right? And what we really see is the propaganda here is at the very top. They're saying, "Oh no, this is the future of buying. This is how everybody's buying nowadays. Let me show you your way to this future buying option." Here it is. It's all the same stuff. There's some everywhere else. The same manner. Like, ain't nothing different. Except this thing at the top. Alright. At the height of the 1920s, average Americans spent more and more on their disposable income on major durable consumer goods. The U.S. consumer economy and stock market was booming throughout the roaring 20s, with stocks reaching their highest point in September of 1929. The advertising industry grew to match. By the end of the 1920s, an increasingly sophisticated advertising industry had integrated new techniques into retail, credit sales management, and consumer research into the marketing process. Marketing efforts accelerated to match businesses' rapid introduction of new products, services to satisfy consumer markets. Many associate the Great Depression with the stock market crash in October of 29. But the economy started contracting in August of that year. Beginning in the economy turned down the last 43 months until March 33. By the end of 33, production had decreased dramatically and the GDP fell 29%. Consumer expenditures decreased from $77 billion to only $45 billion by 33. It's only in like 4 years. Buying on credit or using installment plans had been normalized in the 1920s, but the market crash in October of 29 resulted in a sharp drop of the number of consumer purchasing on credit and by 1930. So while households focused on paying off their existing debts, advertising spent, which had reached new heights of $2 billion by that 29, plummeted to $1.3 billion. Automotive department store, dime stores, and malls mall order ad sales declined dramatically by 1930. As America entered the Great Depression, despite the overall reduction of Spendage in the advertising industry, circulation of newspapers periodically were higher than ever, and the annual amount spent on radio advertising in the 1930s were 7 times more than it had been in 27. Advertisers pivoted messaging to focus on the themes of thrift, patriotism, and fear of humiliation. All of that is propaganda. Like, advertising thrift, patriotism, and fear of humiliation is all propaganda. They use testimonials to hard sell a product placement and sponsorships to convince buyers to spend. That's propaganda. These guide providers primarily and secondarily source their examined marketing efforts, focusing heavily on advertising industry. So basically the entire advertising industry has always been revolved around other people finding information and then giving that to the ad people to use. It's always been like this, and it's always been basically tricking buyers into their product since the Great Depression. It means ads before the Great Depression, A, barely existed, and B, were just honest ads. But this really shows there was a major change during the Great Depression to lie to people. So, and it's not really just lying, it was more like finding the right truths to say to make up a lie that isn't. And like, they're not really lying, they're just getting the most perfect truths to be used in front of you, and that's it. Which, to many, is equivalent to a lie if it's still not true. Well, at least it's not true for them. So this guide, blah 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 blah. There's something else I wanted to read out of here. So I wanted to point out that it says here, during Hoover's presidency, ending with Franklin Roosevelt's inauguration, examples of advertising campaigns, government regulations, and marketing agencies all are included, along with resources for further research. The reason why I want to point that out is Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, he did a lot of great change for this country to get us out of the Depression, get us out of all that. But no one ever really talks about Hoover in presidency. Now, when I was a kid, I did hear a lot of terrible things about Herbert Hoover. Lots of teachers talked negatively about him. And when I started looking into this topic, it made sense. He actually pushed and allowed for a lot of laws to be pushed that basically allowed communism in the ad system. And also allowed advertisers to have more lying ability without lying yet. I mean, they're lying by default, not actually lying. Eventually, it'd get to a point where they'd be allowed to lie. Eventually. So, we're going to go into the next one. Ooh, we got a lot of these to go through because it's a lot of information. So, we're going to, this article will sort of take you on a little bit of a journey, the history of ads, so to speak. But the number one thing I want you to take from this article is that the more ways to have ads, the more money was spent on ads. But that's not the only correlation. So if you look at points around the presidential elections, you'll see almost every new president causes some ad fluctuation. And that flux gets bigger as the years get closer to now. So instead of reading the whole article, we're just going to mostly focus on the images of the explanations that they provide. So here is the very first image. This has a bunch of really good points on it too. Okay. So this is from 1980 to 2020. This image is it's a sector separated graphs. As you see, there's a major disruption from the COVID time frame, which it's one of the main things that they point out in this thing. Something I noticed all media covering ads during COVID is not one media article pointing out that part where companies were not buying ads, people were out of work, nearly multiple months into the can't work train. So for many people, any stimulus check went out, and for many people, they didn't even get a stimulus check. Before anyone got a stimulus check, we started seeing a decrease in ads. So we will point out that there's some strange ad stuff happening right here around COVID. And to be honest, if you look at the ad sellers, they had already lost revenue months and months before China even announced anything in China. So before the flu outbreak, just when they were announcing that there was a possible leak, the possible leak happened near the end of November or the beginning of December in 2019, by the way. Like, that's when we started seeing in China media about it. Which means that's not when it actually happened, that's when they started telling their people about it. Again, we will look at the stimulus checks that came from all this in here in a little bit, but before we get to that, we want to scroll down a little bit to this COVID caused spike in videos. So in this next section on the right, you'll see it has two distinct graphs, one showing that the adults were watching as much TV, the red, as the blue. So as much TV as the digital video, so the red to the blue. Alright. But less ads were actually taken during this time than the 4 years before it or so. So this graph on the far right, on the very far right, just shows the average smartphone users by adults. So no drastic change, a steady climb, so to speak. So before moving on, I had to point out the thing many of you probably didn't even notice. Scroll back up to the top. While I scroll down on my talking points. So this top graph is a global graph that I've taken from all major countries, but not all countries though. All major countries, not all countries. Then the graph on the far right, one right here about the smartphone users, is a Chinese data point. It's China demographic only. Then the graph in the center is the UK, but not all the UK either. Only those that participated both in the Brexit or pushed the Brexit, I'm not sure which, but also don't use British pounds, so they use euro instead. So that's it. So now the data on the left side, these numbers, well, it gets different, and it's different information for all of these numbers. So, for example, the first number, 299 billion, was spent on global internet ads in 2019. Only almost twice of 2015, which was only 4 years prior. The 13.5%, which is the estimated decline of the special UK consumers spent on printed media in 2020 alone, not including the fact that printed media costs while most digital video is free with an ad. So the nearly 7 hours of increased daily watch time is unspecified, but I believe is a China demographic, and it is also unspecified that if it's all watch time or not. I can't confirm all of these. I do believe it is China all watch time, so both TV and digital combined, but I cannot confirm that. Can't confirm either of these, to be honest. So the 183 billion expected spending was released. Here was it? Expected spending was released. The time which, well, hold on. Okay, it was released. It was okay. That 183 billion expected earn was released the same year they expected this spending to increase on, which didn't happen, by the way, until after the stimulus checks went out, which is really sus. Almost like they knew something was going to happen, i.e. the stimulus checks, at the time of this graph, or the time they made this graph. So the 53% increase in global ads didn't happen until after the stimulus checks, and at the time of writing this graph was published, and the ad spends were already over 50% down. So going up another 50% increase would only make the ads about 25% down from the year prior. So it would still be lower than the prior year. So let's point out the years on the bottom of this graph. If we see the TV, television, yep, and print media were already declining as far back as 2007. Yep, right, all the way back down to here. And the biggest decline in 2016, and so in 2019 there was a plateau being formed by search result ads, which we see the little big blue line, and because they reached their limit by 2018, when did targeted ads release? Oh yeah, 2016 to 2018. Now looking back at the 53% expected increase, you would most likely be from target ads online. At this point, you should be seeing that A, old-fashioned ads were cheaper because one, they kind of worked but kind of didn't, so people only spent on what made a return. And then two, for A, ads were already declining in general, and online had actually reached a plateau, so it had almost no impact considerably to old-fashioned ads or in real-life ads, which had more hand-placed ad read type ads. So the other thing you should be seeing, which is B, online ads cost more because one, they are less effective at this, as this graph kind of hints at, and it shows that there was even a plateau before the COVID thing, and almost all those ads were before the COVID, and almost all ads were in decline except social media and search queries, which by this time, one could argue that the search and social media platform companies were already infected by communism as far back as 2014, provably by 2018. But traditional parents have money. Okay, whoa. But could be as far back as 2009, unprovably, when the most changes in ads usage by companies really shifted from a traditional method where they go after the parents who have the money to they started going after the kids, believing they have the money or acting like kids have the money. But also communism perspective started being allowed in ad again by also something to do with the US government pushed laws in 2008 to 2014 that allows companies to basically lie as long as they have a disclaimer somewhere in the ad or online. Hence why all companies gain special clauses that force you to accept when you're going to their website. Yes, that's how all major brands started saying. That's why all major brands started saying, accept this agreement to view our online information, or something similar to that. Because, that was the bypass of the law that Obama pushed. That says, oh no, you can lie to your anybody buying your product. You can lie all you want as long as you have a disclaimer somewhere that doesn't even have to be within the ad. So all this really does, this picture, all it really shows you is how digital ads made the rise as news and TV ads declined. Now there is a strange occurrence where all three ads leveled out, but also the line just before 2020. So this also happened just before 2020. What a strange occurrence. Then after 2020, boom, digital ad raced, while others were not recorded for some reason by this source, Dvorak, which Dvorak is a source for a lot of this stuff. We'll get into that very soon. Okay, so this is what the article is saying caused the strange boom in digital ads. But if you notice, the increase is steadily growing, not any boom like the ad placements were. So this kind of shows more of their bias. And so we're going to look at some data from here. We're going to look at some of this data. Okay. You may be wondering why I am going to the horse's mouth right now to get more info. Here's the problem. Independent third-party ad data analysts have all become major conglomerates. So they are not independent third parties anymore. So they all pretty much use data made by, proclaimed by, posted by, or distributed by Dvorak is what I call it. So we are going to get more data from here. We are not going to read the article though. Boy, was it bad. Okay, so one of my talking points is in the wrong spot, so my apologies for that. The global year-to-year change, 5% in US dollars. Okay, so this has some notes at the bottom I think are really important. It's because it basically says that this includes self-made discounts. Make sure you guys have the link. And non-self-made discounts, agency commissions, and does not include production costs. Sounds like this is basically just the profit from ads then. It also says online display does indeed include social media and online video, which both are also listed on here. So online display shouldn't even be on this list because it wouldn't have enough data to make lists otherwise. So the dark blue is before COVID. The bright blue is technically during COVID because this image was made or published at the start of COVID in 2020. Just the fact that this was made before May 2020, released May of 2020, and the data is all about all of 2020, as if it already happened. Here is media basically lying without lying. What does the data show though? Well, anything that costs money to view was in decline, and anything that was free to view had growth before COVID. Then at COVID, anything that cost any extra amount of money heavily declined and damn near disappeared. It's almost as if people didn't have money for those things. So companies didn't spend money on ads for those things or those ad sectors. Really, this shows companies knew what to spend their ad dollars on before the start of COVID. That's really important. Now, is it this image? Ah, yeah. But look at this. The dates on the bottom: 2019, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 21, 21, 20. Full year 2019. The 4 quarters of 2020, then the full year of 2020. The 4 quarters of 2021, the 4 year of 2021. And it does say revenue growth forecast. You're probably wondering why I'm not saying anything. That negative 8.9%, that negative 2.1% is almost perfect. That 0.6 and that 9.8, almost perfect. That 34.4 and that 25, almost perfect. They knew, Warrack knew in May of 2020 almost exactly how much money was not going to be spent on ads. Almost as if that money had already been not spent on ads, and they were simply showing how much money people were not receiving. It's none of this image makes sense. This whole thing is propaganda. Same thing with this image. 100% propaganda. It even says data indexed to January 2020. January 2020 is not even on here. None of the data indexed is even on here. This is 100% a lie. Nothing about this image is truth. This entire image is false. It's made by Flywheel Digital, who is in part Hyundai Warrack Data, which is the distributor of the data. This is a screenshot from where we pulled the data. You can go back. I already gave you that link. You can go back and grab it. I was in reader mode, so you didn't see this. This was written by James McDonald. And just looking at that date, I have it highlighted in this image. This was either a month prior to the, all the images, or a month after the last month on the last chart we just saw. But this chart was made the month on the chart according to the chart. I really wanted to keep this here to show how bad ads really are. This is our article we were pulling these ads from is actually an ad. Let me show you the bottom where I can kind of prove that. Oh, okay, yeah, I see now. I was about to show that again because that image I was talking about is 100% false. It really is bad data. So here's the bottom of the page. Now if we look, it says a sample report of Warrack's global ad trends, the impact of COVID-19 on the ad investment is available to download here, which we were reading. Okay. The full report is available to Warrack data subscribers here. So at the bottom of this page, before the get a demo and before the about the author sections, there's a footer, which I just read. The sample of the report can be downloaded, which we already read. And the full report is for subscribers only. This is an ad to get subs. Kind of like how YouTubers and YouTuber videos say, people go, what's an ad to get subs, when they say like and subscribe. But if you as a researcher needing this data, you have to pay monthly for who knows how long for one report every time you need a report. And that is where this is fucked up. They're basically, Warrack was an independent and is now a conglomerate. That all media companies' government reports come from this data, which means all of them are paying Warrack monthly subscriptions for this data. Which means Warrack is literally screwing over everyone. All your ad-based information on how much is spent with or on, how people view ads, all of that are just propaganda. And to get that data is on a pay-to-view subscriber monetization model. And there's also ads on the screen in the article. So sure, go view the article on your own home browser or phone or whatever, and see what's up, because I do many things to hide ads from you all on this show. Alright, so this is one of the images that I actually found important. So why am I showing this? Ads are always paired beside CPI and inflation, because this place does it but this does it with GDP. We did see some non-government docs use other GDP instead of CPI. So why is GDP so important instead of CPI? GDP is a global factor, not a US factor. That's why some of our data is listed with CPI, as ad data should be paired with. And some is listed with GDP, which shouldn't be paired without per country CPI data. This is why why is this? So GDP includes tax and other variables because it's the total market value of the final goods and services produced, not purchased. CPI, even global CPI, only shows how much average Spendage was spent by citizens. So how much average wealth did a citizen spend? GDP is on how much stuff is available by companies' production. It's not actually what was purchased. It has nothing to do with it. Have you ever heard of the clothing problem? A lot of people don't know about this. Fast fashion. It's an environmental impact. It's destroying the earth. Many people, okay, I'm going to read my notes here. Many people don't know about this, but there is a clothing issue made from fast fashion and high production of automated production lines. GDP includes all the excess that companies are not selling, choosing not to sell, and would never sell to be or even would never be able to sell. While CPI only is what is spent by the citizens. Again, CPI does not include non-citizen spendages. Many countries don't track CPI anymore. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if the US government still tracks CPI in their own country. This is important because all data after 2008, so 2009 and up, are based on GDP only and not CPI. So before, we could actually use CPI to see when ads were spent by companies at bad times, which actually went away by 1940. Companies pretty much knew what to spend their ad money on by 1940, and were hyper-focusing on non-media ads, which were directly government and propaganda ads. It gets harder to track after the use of GDP. This is why we started off using old data, and because it's way more reliable than actual new data. So we want to look at, when did the 3 rounds of stimulus checks go out? March 2020, December 2020, March 2021. Now let me get rid of some of these tabs so we can make stuff a little bit faster. That's really important. We're going to go back to this picture. If we see, well, I have notes. Now, if we use this perspective of money, the U.S. government got free money March 2020. Not U.S. government. U.S. citizens got free money in March 2020, December 2020, and March 2021. We see that there was a global ad dip during the first month, during 1st of March 2020. But then we see recovery after that. And I am saying the global return of ad spendages was because not people had money. Not everyone in the U.S. even got stimulus checks. Nor did most of the world get stimulus checks. But because the U.S. government, the U.S. started spending money on ads again. Remember, this is all about ads. So companies, governments, agencies, they didn't spend money when they knew people had no money, no way to make money. Then bought ads the second they knew people were going to have money. Many people right now may be realizing this is how ads should work, right? Ads get people to buy things, right? No. You're wrong. Let me show you how you're wrong. What is an ad? Short for advertisement, for advertising. It's for advantage. It's actually short for quite a few things. Let's go to more specific what we're talking about. Advertisement. A public notice. A paid notice that is published or broadcasted. That's all it really is. This last bit, as to attract customers or to provide information of public interest, isn't actually important. But when you look at that as an important factor, then you get why propaganda, like if they don't put this last bit in here, all ads are propaganda. All advertisements are propaganda. So no, an ad isn't to get people to buy things. It is to inform them that you have things they might want. Everything else is propaganda, which we covered communism propaganda earlier. But to be clear, propaganda can be something as simple as spreading the ideals of information or rumors for the purpose of helping or hurting an institution, cause, or person. So nowadays, ads are propaganda to hurt the cause of common life in most countries, regardless of the country the ad is ran in. Companies produce ads, but more importantly, governments push ads and produce them. Now, so let's continue looking at the ad data to get more of this point across. Here is the global free data on internet ad revenue. This is one thing to consider, is the cost of ads versus the profit from ads. Everyone forgets ads have profits. That's how they work. Without profits, ads wouldn't be a non-profit charity system. But it isn't. So the companies behind serving ads are very profitable, as this public report shows. This was released sometime around the time of the last images were, looking around May of 2020. I want to point out that by May of 2020, there was already a 12% increase compared to the previous year's first quarter. Now let's get to that point where we can see it. This was during the COVID. Globally, ads were in extreme profits. This shows that the images we saw earlier had truthful and soothful information, and they were still basically lies. And if you don't know the difference between truthful and soothful, soothful does not stand for soothing. Sooth does not stand for soothing. Sooth is the original term of truth. It meant a truth that someone can experience upon their own without any other influence. A truth originally was agreed upon sooth. Alright. So, here's an article released in October of 2020, a bit further down in the year. Now, we're not going over this except for the image. Notice we showed ad data for these dates earlier, and there was ads spent in the US in these years, like 2001, 2008, 2020. But for some reason, this image would make you think that ads were not bought, but somehow the opposite was done in 2001, 2008, and 2020. That would be impossible. This image is propaganda and only contains the top national companies buying ads, nothing more, and much less than that too. Really, this is showing that depending on whom is sitting in the seat of the President of the United States will determine if the public data of non-global ad spends will be real data or fake data. This does go back to the communism use ads But in this case, the article is the ad, not the image about ads. Again, made by Capital Vigilant. Visual Capitalist. Those are all the names of people who wrote it, edited it, and all that. So you can see where the lies came from. Now I'm going to show you some more of the same ideal. Okay. Was this not already in this mode? Now I want to show you the same ideal, but on a broad level, with CPI though. So we're going to look at some graphs, not read through all of this. So this is going to show us the cost of goods over time and how the concept of all items change over time as well. It's hard to explain this otherwise, which I already kind of tried to do with the GDP for CPI, but this should still mostly stick to CPI. As we dive in, look at the dates to see how major events actually affect CPI or consumer price indexing. So earlier we showed CPI is indirectly related to the political votes, or at least the combination of both directly goes to how much advertising is being spent for non-media based ads. Then when we looked at how data around ads has become more propaganda over the years, as ads have also become more globalism propaganda. So now some of this data isn't so nice to give us non-media and versus media like we had earlier, just as a heads up. It's going to be a little bit more convoluted than that. They're not gonna be so blunt with us. All right, first thing, I want to check my preview before I go further. Okay, it's scary not having a preview. So all items consumer price index 12-month change from 1914 to 1929. This is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. What happened in 1916? What? Yeah, something that pushed into new jobs. But then because of those new jobs, something else happened in 1919. Then what happened in 1921? We kind of saw communism-based inflation of CPI from the data earlier, but here it pretty much confirms that there was more growth between 1924 and 1926. Maybe from the other political parties or independents. I don't know. Moving on. What happened in 1930 to 1933? 3-year downturn maybe? And what happened in 1941 then? Okay, you'll notice the CPI is sometimes behind major events, as the major event causes a downturn, while other CPIs increase just before a major event. Wait, no, I said that wrong. Downturn. While the CPI increases, then a major event happens, almost as if the CPI increase causes a downturn. So it's kind of creepy that sometimes just the CPI going up seems to cause the downturn. But if you look at when those CPIs increase and then decrease again, they're right around presidential elections. Or major US elections, I should say, because then it's not always presidential. Alright, so ignore 1953 to 1955. Yeah, just kind of don't look at that. I'm joking, because that may be, some may say that having a ton of people from war coming in out of nowhere can cause a downturn, but in reality it just offsets the total numbers available to be included in the CPI. So one day major migrations in or out needs to be looked at how they affect the CPI. I said that wrong. Maybe one day we might have to look at how major migrations in and out affect CPI and ads, as well as government spending in ads. Because, yeah, migration in and out does affect if a government is going to spend money on ads or not. Hint, hint. Alright. Almost looks like someone proving they can positively affect the CPI with something between some strange years, like wars and riots. Strange. Imagine riots can cause CPI to go down. Wars cause CPI to go up. And ending wars can cause CPI to go down. Weird. Weird. This strange spikes would cause major offsets in the CPI, like we saw in the previous graph, hinting at why things are being separated. So the CPI seems more flat now. In reality, nothing actually has changed. Pretty much the same years right here, but now with food separated, so those peaks we saw previously are now reappearing. Strange how much the gas and energy affects people's spending. So basically now we got more things added, and they didn't need to consider shelter and apparel ever before now, because it was always all items. That's all I will say, besides the cost of living skyrocketed between 1970 and 1980, then died in 81 to 82, and again in 82. Those are all very distinct years of things. Showing more directly caused influence. If you want to find out what happened the year before in the year of each downturn year shown in this graph. Make it make sense, they'll say. Okay, well, before 1983, tests were done to see how the government could influence citizen spending. And looks like they figured it out by 1983, because the lines are nearly linear. Except for two: apparel and energy or commodities. I'm not sure which one that actually is. But it does point out that quite a bit of stuff was learned how to become. This graph shows that there are things that are controllable. How much people spend on energy is controllable. All items except for food and energy, controllable. Apparel, maybe not so much. Food, very controllable. Medical costs, very controllable. Services costs, very controllable. Notice all items are automatically without food and energy now. So shelter also in that list. It's on the graph, but is it a part of the list? No, shelter is now its own sector of CPI. It actually was from the last one, but it just like shows you that more directly. Alright, something I was asked when I was talking with some people about today's episode, when I was getting stuff prepared, something I kept getting asked was, how much should a company spend on ads anyways? Earlier I hinted at one time that companies kind of only spend as much money into ads as what they get in return. So a company would start spending an allotment saved up after a year or two for ads. And they would want ads to span for about 5 years. Then there would only be reinvestments per year that there was a noticeable return from the ads, and the ad changes over the year. But once targeted ads became this new form, all that changed. Now companies get loans to get ads for about 10 years, while other companies are getting loans for a single major event in ads. So I thought this may help show how much money companies are being propagandaed into actually buying. So this is a propaganda piece to get companies to believe they need to spend more money on stuff. But this is actually for small businesses. This is to get small businesses to buy more money into advertising through FOMO. And more than just FOMO too. So number one, websites. Marketers spend 9% of their budget on building and maintaining great websites. This spending has increased and will continue to do so. The goal of these investments is to create more personalized, responsive, meaningful user experience. No, that is not true. Advertising your website is to get more people on the fucking website. Fucking lie. Number two, digital commerce. In the area of digital commerce, marketers spend 8% of their revenue in this area. Marketers invest here to build better relationships, gain customers, insight, and secure brand loyalty. B2C companies spend more on digital commerce than B2B companies, with retail and finance services slowing down the largest budgets. The greater the investment, the greater the return, or so one hopes. The reason why they had to put in so one hopes, because digital commerce has been nothing but downturn. Businesses that do B2B have the hardest time staying alive because B2C takes them out. Digital commerce is bad in many ways. Many ways. People right now are thinking, well, digital commerce is me buying stuff online. Not true. A digital store allows you to buy stuff online. A digital commerce is an entire marketplace for businesses to purchase and sell only online. Online goods, stuff that doesn't even fucking exist. Nothing about digital commerce is about physical items. It's not like buying something and having it shipped to your house. It's about buying something and have it downloaded to your computer. Buying something and have it downloaded to your phone. Because it doesn't fucking exist. It's fake. It's digital. It's not real. It's not physical. People don't spend money on digital commerce to help, what does it say here? To help them with retail and financial services. No, it doesn't even say that. To build better relationships and gain customer insight and secure brand loyalty. No. Allowing people to buy digital items does not do any of that. It simply allows you to have another axis of revenue from your customers in other businesses. That's it. Digital advertising. Marketers are raising the bar on their digital ad campaigns. For one, it's getting harder on the organic content to be noticed. Paid content is more likely to reach your audience. So much that advertisers are expected to spend $300 billion on paying content by 2019, which we saw then ever happened. Second, there are many types of digital strategies like display, native, social, video, and even mobile, making it possible to find something effective and affordable. Again, digital advertising, it's targeted ads, is what they're getting at. And digital advertising has always been basically worthless. It works on very few people. It basically works on gamblers. And we know this. It's been known. Since before 2009, it's been known that online ads are not as good as non-online ads. Period. Although digital advertising is expected to grow so immensely, companies are still committed to traditional print ads. Notice that they're making a traditional print ads sound terrible. But believe it or not, it's the only thing keeping people alive. It is strange how putting billboards up, putting ads on TV, radio, and before movies, and putting them in your magazines actually gets people to buy shit. Because it's going to be related to the thing that you're looking at. You know, like digital ads, it's like anything could be put in that ad spot. Anything. And that's the problem. It's because when you're going through propaganda, you want more propaganda is better. Regardless if it's good propaganda, the proper propaganda, just more propaganda equals good. Because the way propaganda works is the more you look at it, the more you believe it, the more you trust it, the more you do it, the more it works. Ads traditionally don't work that way. Ads traditionally just inform you of stuff, and then if that's something you need, you go, oh, now I know where to get it. But you don't have that nowadays, where people don't know where to get stuff. They pretty much know where they're going to get stuff. So, they are saying that research suggests that traditional advertising is the best. Oh wait, this does not. Okay. I will be giving you the how to find this here in a second. So let me go and read my notes first. So this entire research paper says traditional advertising is best, but younger crowds are less on traditional methods like news and print media to even give them a chance. So if you read all the given results, you'll see that the cost of advertising is basically not considered here at all. Other major points to consider: most of the research was based on getting ads for paid or winnable gigs, and then looked at the demographic of people that showed up or responded. So these are skewed results and even skewed tests. Like 100% skewed. Like, the reason why it's skewed is because the way these tests were done we actually go through, I'm not going to read it all, but the way they did this is the study delves into the comparison between traditional and blah blah blah. What does it actually say how they did it? It's somewhere in here, but basically what they did was they put up ads saying, some of them were like, call us in, we'll pay you for your information. Another one, you know, and there's other ones where they were like, show up and we'll pay you to show up. And so all the information from it is skewed because it's not real. It's not how actual ads work. You know, the ad doesn't say, call me and I'll give you $10 to buy my product that costs $15. You know, that's not how it works. And the only ads that do that we'll get into. There are ads that do kind of that, where they say, I'll give you $1 to buy this $5 item. This entire thing is pretty fucked up. So if we're going to conclusion, the comparison between traditional and digital advertising for small businesses underscores a dynamic landscape where both avenues for both offer distinct advantages. Traditional methods like TV, radio, print remain pivotal for establishing brand recognition and reaching broad audiences, particularly among older demographics. However, digital advertising, especially through social media and search ads, provides cost-effective, precision-targeted, and trackable results, offering a competitive edge. Now, one of the things they don't mention here, but it is mentioned in some of the reference source material, is that the digital ads the only reason to pay for some of these ads is that it allowed you to track the results to see if it was or was not working. In many of these references, it actually shows it was not working. And so they actually included the fact that you could see if the ad was not working as a positive reason to pay for that ad. It's still skewed. So by combining the broad reach of traditional methods with the target agencies of digital platforms, businesses can effectively enhance brand recognition. And again, even this bottom part is basically a lie. It's saying by using both, you get the best of both worlds. But if you actually go into the research of some of this, they say the complete opposite in the actual source material. So, very confusing. Everything that we're talking about is very confusing because no matter what you do, everything about the research behind this is fucking skewed and a lie. And unless you actually look at how was this done, looking at the actual, reference materials and stuff down here and actually go through and see how they did this and see how they did that, you'll never understand it. And that's the reason why it's set up like this. So now we're going to basically, oh wait, this is how you get that. This is how you get that that article thing we were just looking at a second ago. This is how you get it. Okay. So now we got this. This is an article breaking down a research paper. Tons of other sites and articles and documents for governments actually refer to as a source. So we're not looking at the direct research paper, which there is a link in here that gives you that. But the thing to notice is for a new form of ad system. This is all for a new form of ad system, paid search. So paid click lasted a couple of seconds within the digital world, so less than 5 years. And it died because the amount of money people were paid wasn't enough to survive. This paper basically states that paying people to search works better than paid click. Because if they search for a term with paid ads behind it, they get a piece of that pay. Now, the actual research doesn't reflect how paid search would be used in real world. For example, anything searched was paid for versus in real usage, not all terms will have payment behind it. In actual usage, only searches ending in purchasing an object would result in payment. And in many cases, only if that brand had paid for a paid search ad and that brand's object was purchased would it count and would the person get paid for it. The other thing is, in some of instances, the search page would have the brand name showing the brands to search for to get paid, and others didn't. And then there were those that required the actual purchase of the object to get paid, and some that didn't require the purchase of the object to get paid. So the research being conducted to prove the validity of new age ad systems are not in any way like how they would be used in real life. Targeted ads was done this way. Like, the research for targeted ads was similar to this. The research for paid click was similar to this. Basically, all ad research for the newest ad form since 1940 has been faked, propaganda, bullshit, and has not worked, cost companies more money provably year over year, and does less year over year provably. Okay. Now this is one of the biggest public medical journals, and this is also a BS research paper. The research being done was putting paid gigs as ads, which we already saw another research paper doing, right? And then recording the demographic of people responding. The last one, they actually had to show up. This one, they just have to respond. These are not real ads and would never be as if real. These people whom saw the ad and went for it are probably people of need or gamblers. Because that's the type of person to respond to an ad offering payment for responding or showing up. We have discovered that before in the past. Now I need to go down. It says to the conclusion. I think I just got, yep. Targeted web-based advertisements may be more effective in recruiting older adults for clinical trials at a faster rate than traditional recruitment methods, but need further evaluation of compatible study designs, potential population bias, and cost effectiveness. Oh, so now you know the bias. Let's review the conclusion. That's sure, they got their target audience in faster than traditional, but unfortunately the test isn't enough to conclude concretely that this is actual results and not skewed results, because it says, and I quote, but need further evaluation of compatible study designs, potential population bias, and cost effectiveness, because these tests were not ethical, practical, nor compliant to the U.S. science standards. They say at the end of the study that the entirety of the study has to be reconsidered by evaluating the compatibility of the study. In other words, i.e., they are saying, we don't believe this study is replicatable in real life situations. Like, no duh. Companies are not going to spend millions per year to just pay people to show up to their store. It may be cheaper than targeted ads though, and that's the only other point I wanted you to get from this paper. According to the data on this paper and the last paper we looked at large conglomerates that spend over $500,000 a year on ads or ad items or on ads for sales, this is a paper about target web ads, the only kind of target ads at the moment. The last paper were about people paying people to just respond, was cheaper than target ads. And this paper for target ads paid people to just show up and was cheaper. Oh, sorry, I got those backwards. The one where they just had to show up was cheaper than targeted ads, and the one where it was targeted ads where they just had to respond was still cheaper than targeted ads, or cheaper than traditional ads. Honestly, target ads in many smaller companies can be done on a smaller budget. But if they saved the money instead and just got a national package at a traditional media ad firm, it would result in more sales overall for every year they did that. But compared to like every year they spent the money on targeted ads. But if that same small company just did a reward program and paid people to buy things that they are trying to sell fast, then they would save money and get more loyal customers, according to the papers we've been linking to and reviewing. When you review all of the 4 papers we've linked to and reviewed, they all come down to the same result. Just straight up paying people to buy shit you want to get rid of is more cost effective and works better to get a better loyal base than any ad system ever, because word of mouth is best. So if a company is buying ads to have propaganda to convince people to use them over others, then what is it when a government does it? Remember, I'm saying ads are propaganda. Well, believe it or not, the government and people around it, far back as 2014, agrees with that. Just read bold stuff. And when you go through here, it's really freaking terrible. Like stuff that they're advertising for. Attempted to dissuade individuals from using marijuana. Promoted the use of social service programs, viewed as overly expensive or wasteful. They're perceived possibly misleading. Federal agency job openings. Competitions for federal contracts, the sales of surplus government property. Those last three are the only three that should be having ads. And they spend millions and millions and millions on ads. So much money is wasted on ads. Look at this. Full year 09. What is that? $1,180.2 million. 2010. $946.6 million. Millions of dollars. And this says that on advertising contracts. But we already saw it's actually more than just advertising contracts. And when you say, okay, the Department of Defense, and it breaks down to which one spent what, and we're like, Department of Education doesn't need to be buying ads at all. Department of Veteran Affairs, I can understand why they bought ads. Department of Transportation shouldn't be buying ads. Department of Defense should. Okay, they probably need to get people to join the military. Department of Health and Human Services, they do have to have some kind of ad. But I mean, like, this is more money than ads should ever be spent by the U.S. government. This is fucking insane, the amount of money they're spending. And then we've given you years about ad sales for the years that this paper is talking about. I mean, you can go back and see how that was actually directly affecting it compared to the years prior. And now this paper, this document, is set up for 2014. But I believe some of the information on here actually goes further back than that, so you have to kind of pay attention to what it says. Some of it's going to be 2013, 2012, and 2010. You know, all the way back to 2010, I believe it was. According to my notes, this one. Okay. So I just want to show you that the government spends tons of money on ads in areas that don't make sense. And according to everything happening, they're only going to be spending more money. Now, this was before Trump took office, so this is as far back as 2023, and it's for information about Biden's last year in office. So we see they actually spent more ads. They spent more money on ads than any other president ever. Did I actually pass the thing that actually said it? Oh, it won't pop up without. Okay. So if we come down here and we look, the projection of ads during Biden's last year was more money spent on ads than any other president before him. And their office, whatever, did end up spending more and more and more money on ads than anybody else. Dems have spent the most money on ads, just like communists. Because they stopped tracking how much money communists spent on ads back in like 1942 or something like that. So we can see the Democrats actually spend the most amount of money on ads, and they do it in the worst way. They do it almost all digitally. While you see Republicans are really going through broadcast media because they understand how that is where the real money of your value comes from. Alright. So why is it important to look at this? Well, if we look at this paper from the Victims in Communism, and they point out key demographics and perspectives of those demographics by age through it's by generational age. So demographic by generational age of communisms. Okay. First off, this was released in 2020, and I want to give this to you guys. We're going to look at specifically something in here, one specific thing in here. Okay. Well, I guess two specific. It's the people that were actually participated in this data, and we want to review the very last graph they give us. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of data in here, and quite a bit of this information is like really important, but not to what we see here. More women participate in this than men. We can see the number, which generations participate in this. We see most of the people that participate in this was millennial boomers. But anything that says Gen Z or that information, it's a little bit skewed, kind of. Anything that says silent generation, also. Income, we can see most people that were involved in this is middle class, but not high middle class. It's like more middle class. Most people who participate in this actually have some kind of graduate, but that's about it. And ethnicity was, if I remember right, fairly mixed, but less white than most. So this was loaded. Just give me the dang page I need, bro. Of course I should have took a screenshot of the page. The only thing I got left to load it. Why is it not loading? And why didn't the whole thing load while I was... It's just a PDF, it's downloaded, right? Hello? So I can't really show you the data. I do have information written down. If you look at... If I could get the thing here. The age demographic that is heavily into socialism is the youth. The youngest ones take over the country in about 10 or so years. Socialism is communism, or a form of it. This means that while the people who had the worst perspective on communism and socialism did in fact have communism and socialism in ads throughout their history of ads, especially after World War I. So what do you think will happen when the age demographic that looks favorably at these things, socialism and communism, becomes in power of the US government and local city and states? The propaganda is about to become blunt and in your face instead of behind a shadowy veil like it always has been. I'm really upset that I can't get the rest of this thing to pop up. Alright, I'm just going to close it out. Look, proving that communists spend bigger on ads than any other political group could be easier than trying to just prove ads are propaganda. But to be honest, I'd rather attempt to show you the reality, than what's easy to prove. If anything, hopefully this shows you that ads are some form of propaganda, either corporate or political, but absolutely spending large sums on ads is proof that a company, entity, or government is participating in propaganda, and the amount of spendage on those ads is proof of the amount of propaganda. Sometimes all someone can do is give you the information, give you the opportunity to learn and have more to focus on, but at least now you have a footing of understanding some of this before jumping in and learning more on your own. I do want to thank you all for listening to today's episode. I know it is not the most clean-cut way of telling you and showing you and being by example, but I am hoping, if anything, this will still get some point of message across. Because even though this seems kind of dumb, blah, 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 it's really important. Why is it important? Because the demographic of kids who look at this stuff positively is getting ready to control us when we have the least amount of ability to help ourselves.